Hi, and welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name, your congenial, convivial, and amiable host as always. Let's go right to the phones to open this segment. Let's go to Bill in Martinburg, Virginia. Bill, thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I was calling, and I say I'm not up on government, laws and all that, but it would seem to me that if you had somebody working for you, which is what the president is doing, and they were caught lying and not doing their job, you would fire them.
Yeah, that's what you would think, isn't it? I mean, that's what Chris Christie did, isn't it?
Yes.
And yet there's not a single head that's rolled in the IRS. Nothing has rolled with the Obamacare rollout. Nobody's heads have rolled over the NSA spy scandal. None of that. Everybody still got their jobs. I mean, some people
What does the populace have to do? Could they circulate something to be signed for the, have them, what do they call it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, the one thing that we can do is we can be in communication with our elected representatives, and that brings me to an action alert that we sent out yesterday, Bill, that have to do with some more shenanigans from the IRS. Remember, and this has to do with Barack Obama, and Bill, right to your question about what we can do. The IRS, now remember, FBI said we're not going to prosecute anybody for what they did to the Tea Party. But we've been out there horribly harassing Sarah Palin's father 6 times since 2008. And now the IRS is getting ready to issue new regulations that would pretty much put the AFA out of business. I do not exaggerate. These new regulations, and they're regulations, Congress doesn't have any part of this. This is regulations, again, coming from the executive branch imposed on nonprofits like the American Family Association, Family Research Council, on the C4s. Now, there's a difference between a C3 and a C4. They're both under the 501c segment of the IRS code. A 501c3 is educational. A 501c4 can be politically active. They can do voters' guides. They can produce voter scorecards. They can lead voter registration drives. They can take part in get out the vote drives. All of these are completely bipartisan. They're nonpartisan. If you produce a neutral voter guide that simply outlines where these candidates stand on different issues that are of interest to people in the pro-family community, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly acceptable. It's not a partisan voter guide. It just lays out the issues, lets the candidates declare where they stand. Same thing with voter registration drives. That's not partisan because they could go out and vote for anybody that they want. Get out the vote drives. Again, that's not partisan. You just want people to be good, active citizens. Well, these regulations would clamp down on anything that AFA, and it would quickly get to the C3s. Now, on our C4, AFA's C4, we produce perhaps the most effective voter guide in the country. It's available before the general elections. We'll have it up going into November of 2014. We have scorecards that evaluate the votes of lawmakers based on pro-family values. That's perfectly fine. But Matt Barber's got a piece on CNS News today about what the danger that these C4 groups would be. And now here's the catch. Conservative groups use 501c4s because most conservative groups also have a 501c3 that's just educational in purpose. It can be educational about politics, but it's educational. But many of them will also have a C4 so that they can do voters' guides and registration drives and that kind of stuff. So very quickly you can see that if they go after the C4s, it's not going to be long before they're going to be going after the C3s as well. But here's what Matt Barber outlines are the problems with this. These regulations would prohibit using words like oppose, vote, support, defeat, and reject. So those would all be flagged, and if you even use those words, you would be accused of violating your 501c4 status. It would prohibit the mentioning on any form of communication the name of a candidate for office 30 days before a primary election, 60 days before a general election. You couldn't even say the guy's name, even if it was completely objective, had nothing to do with criticism or commendation. If you mention his name, you would be in trouble. You can't mention the name of a political party 30 days before a primary and 60 days before election. If it shows up anywhere in your communication, that would be a capital offense. It prohibits voter registration drives. You can't conduct nonpartisan get-out-the-vote drives. And what I was getting to, liberal groups will use 527s. That's another part of the IRS code. They create 527 organizations. They're going to be completely left alone in this. So this is very clearly something that is targeted at pro-family groups, Tea Party groups, and conservative groups. It would prohibit creating or distributing voter guides. Couldn't do that, even if they were completely objective, just on issues that matter to the pro-family community. You could not host candidates for office at any event, even including debates. So if you had a nonprofit organization, you just wanted to host a debate and you invited the Democrats to come and the Libertarians and the Republicans to come and debate, you couldn't do that. That would be a capital offense. It would restrict employees from volunteering for campaigns, even on their own time. So somebody works for AFA, they decide they want to get out involved. Say we have a personhood campaign, they want to distribute literature. You couldn't even do that. That would be a death penalty offense. You can't distribute any materials prepared on behalf of a candidate for office. It would restrict the ability of officers and leaders of such organizations to speak out about incumbents, legislation, and voting records. Now think what that's going to mean for like AFR talk. I mean, the closer you get to election, the more important it is that we have an educated and informed electorate. So it wouldn't be long before they'd be coming after AFR talk to try to get us off the air if we were speaking publicly about incumbents, legislation, and voting records. That's what we speak about every single solitary day. These leaders could not make public statements about the nomination of judges. You couldn't say anything about a potential judicial nominee to the federal bench. That would be a period. And there's a 90-day blackout period in an election year that restricts the speech of these C4 organizations. Now, we've got an action alert. It's on our website. If you've gotten it, please call. All you got to do is plug in your zip code, and it'll identify your representative and give the phone number to his office. Please call him or her, as the case may be, and urge them to banish these proposed regulations, defeat these proposed regulations for 501c4s. You call our offices, they'll know what you are talking about. But this is critical. It would have to do with the future viability, survival even, of organizations like the AFA and our ability to carry out our mission. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Royal, Edmond, Oklahoma. Royal, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Yeah, Royal, go right ahead. You're on.
Okay, yes, sir. I wanted to just make a couple of comments about the Obama saying he has the ink and the phone to do what he wants to and, just overlook Senate and all that. First of all, he needs to abide by the rules, of course. And then for all of those of us in this earth who says we're Christians and believers in the Word of God, we got to remember we have to pray, because prayer is what God said changes things, and we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities and rulers in higher places. So it's not against us, against one another, or against other human beings. We are going against the spiritual realm of the earth, and we need to pray for those things. And then just pray that God would touch the minds and hearts of those people in authority and change the way that they're trying to do things. And if that doesn't happen, God would take care of it and move them out of position, just like he did in the biblical days.
Yeah, well, you're right, because God is the one that elevates men to office. He's the one that can depose them. And you're right. This is a matter of spiritual warfare, and that's why prayer is absolutely central. That's why we start every program every day with prayer. I appreciate the call. Thank you for that, Edmund. And you look at like the contrast between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, for instance. You clearly see the spiritual warfare that's involved in, because these were not at all similar. In the French Revolution, all the churches were closed, crosses were forbidden, religious monuments were destroyed, public and private worship and religious education was outlawed. The Robespierre put a prostitute in the Notre Dame Cathedral, covered her with a sheet, and called her the goddess of reason. And they didn't want a constitution that was dated from the year of the Lord or the year of our Lord like our Constitution is. So they made 1791 the new year one. Didn't even want a 7-day week because one of them could be a Sabbath. So they created a 10-day week. So obviously no parallels whatsoever between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. You obviously have spiritual warfare involved there. Under the French Revolution, Christianity prohibited. The cross prohibited. Under the American Revolution, Christianity honored, elevated, protected, and the cross honored and respected. Let's go to Mark in Tupelo, Mississippi. Mark, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, kind of a comment about what you had at the first part of your show on the welfare state.
Yes, sir.
And the cheaper labor coming in. I know it never happened under this administration. It probably never happened at all. But if at some point we get more Republicans in office, what about a federal law that prohibits people who are getting government subsidies from being allowed to vote? And that way people who are paying into the system could make the decisions on government instead of having the people who want to sit around and do nothing, as you say.
Well, you know, and what, yeah, and what
that are going to drain the money.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there, Mark, is, you know, it is fundamentally unfair, and it's wrong, it's unjust, and I don't know what the solution is. Yours is one that other people have suggested, but these people who have no tax liability, they actually get money back. In fact, the bottom 40% of taxpayers last year received their tax liability was negative 9.3%. In other words, they got money back. They didn't pay in, they got money back. They got more money back than they paid in. The top 40% of all taxpayers paid something like 80% of all of the tax burden in America. And so it's fundamentally not fair for this 40%, and this is Mark's point, the 40% are getting money back from everybody else. But they have the same right to vote as the productive taxpayers that are paying all the taxes. So they're going to vote for people that are going to want to take more money from the productive citizens of society and give it to them. And Mark's point, and I think it's, you know, it's a fundamentally just point. If you don't have skin in the game, if you're not a contributor in some way to this economy and this political structure, you probably shouldn't be eligible to vote in elections. Focal Point, AFR Talk.